Right. It says here on our screen, we are live. Welcome again, Ricardo. Welcome to all of our viewers. This is quite an unusual lindaschool throwback. And why? Well, because it's the first time we have the same person on our series as the one that was here last week. And why is this? Well, because we can. It was just something that became possible that was also connected to the fact that Ricardo has a YouTube channel where he has been sharing a lot of wisdom around things that are very relevant to our students and to anyone who is in education, and not only, of course, to anyone in general. And so the opportunity came up, and that's why Ricardo is here again. Anyway, for people who did not watch our last week's throwback, could you please just briefly present yourself, Ricardo?
Sure.
Thank you.
So, well, when I left 3 years ago, I left secondary school. Then I did a gap year because I wanted to apply to the UK for a course in mathematics, mainly to Cambridge University. I ended up being rejected, but that was actually the turning point so that I could have the motivation to actually quit games and just focus on my studies. And actually, I managed to get into Warwick University, which was also a great choice. And I've had my first and second years there, and I'm now going to start the third year.
Right. So you are a budding mathematician.
Correct.
But as far as I have gathered from our conversation and from everything that I've seen on your channel, you are also very interested in how human psychology works, in how people approach life. And you are also very interested in sharing new points of view that can make life easier and simpler, basically. And last time we ended our session with this question, which is now where we're going to start, which is, if you're going to share with us something really relevant for youngsters, children, and adults alike to achieve their dreams, to really make them come true, what is it? What would you like to share from your own experience around that?
Yeah. Well, I actually had thought quite a lot about this because since it's such a general question, I guess you could tackle it many ways. But what I decided to go with was that you should fall in love with the process, not the results.
Wow.
Because the thing is that, well, what is the most wanted job right now, especially for teenagers and whatnot? It's exactly to be a YouTuber. But I want to be a YouTuber doesn't really mean I want to be a YouTuber. It only means I want to be popular. I just want to have all those followers, all that adoration. But the thing is that really doesn't matter, because the problem is that the results will occupy a very small percentage of your time. Most of your time will actually be spent with the process. Because after all, before you can even get any results, you need to spend quite a lot of time just hustling and just working as hard as you can and consistently to just get there. And the thing is, if you're just focusing on the results, you might be able to do it for 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, and whatnot. But eventually, if you don't actually love the process itself, then you aren't going to survive the long term. And essentially, the process towards success in any job, in any business, it's always very long term. overnight success is just a myth. It's just because people generally only see the results, but never see the work that went behind it. And for example, when you try to compare yourself and think that other people may be better, then what you need to realize is, what are you doing in your own process that person is doing? So in a sense, I think we could also introduce another very important idea, which is try to behave like the person you want to become. So like, for example, if you want to be a YouTuber, so what does a serious YouTuber do? What do they know? What do they learn? How do they behave? What are their habits? And basically focusing on the process is really the most important, because if you think about it, well, if you just focus on the results and not focus on the process, then you might never get there, because you don't survive the time that it takes for the process to take time. But if you, on the other hand, if you completely forget the results and just focus on doing the process and improving it over time, then the results will be inevitable. Okay. And essentially that's the idea.
Yeah, so in our quick fix society, that seems to be a little bit hard to really put in practice. I see there are many courses online and stuff like that, like sort of gain, I don't know how many followers. So it sort of mostly says it's like really easy and you can do it overnight and everything's going to be glamorous and so on. And that's not true.
Oh, no. I mean, I think the solution is always to try to do your best to. So, for example, in my case with my YouTube videos, my goal is, since I'm still learning how to make videos, really the goal is just to improve one aspect of the video one at a time, and really not worry about the numbers for the time being, because we generally tend to worry too much about the short term. So like, how well did this one video go? How well how many subscribers did I gain and whatnot? When in fact, this is a game for the long term. So what really matters is not that one video, but it's more the path that you go towards there. So
that could be actually extrapolated to all of life, because the fact is that it's not really where you're going or the exact place where you are going to arrive. It's really enjoying the process, enjoying the experience, going through it fully, really, really being immersed in your experience. And that then sooner or later you arrive at a certain goal, and then you realize that there's always more evolution, always more expansion. And so it's not about the result, the arrival, but the process itself in anything in life, really. In life itself, basically. I saw you've just recently published a video which is how to be a good student, what no one tells you. So can you just sort of in a short time share with us, what is it that no one tells people about being a good student?
Okay. Actually, so basically the idea of the video was that perhaps I was just a bit annoyed, like how people focus too much. For example, when they get bad grades, we usually focus too much. Either the teacher is bad, or I need someone else to explain me things, or I need a new study method, or I need to study more, or I need to be more organized, or I need to be less lazy and whatnot. When in fact, we forget about the single most important thing when it comes to studying and learning, which is actually sleep. And so essentially the whole video is firstly explaining why sleep is so important, and then listing all the habits so that you yourself can build your own routine to ensure the best sleep possible. Because the thing is that we really underestimate, especially the effects of sleep on memory. Because the thing is, first you need to sleep in the day after you learn something, because it is during sleep where your short-term memories, so the things that you learn in that day, are transferred to the long-term memories and are essentially stored. And you also need to study before the day of learning. And this is funny because the thing is that during sleep, what happens is that the brain cleans up all the information that is left so that for the next day, it can absorb new information again. And so, for example, if you sleep badly on one night, you are going to remember much less what you learned on that day. And also for the next day, you'll just not really be able to absorb too much new information.
So, like one bad night's sleep can affect 3 or 4 days, basically.
Yeah,
of learning.
Yeah, it really takes a bit of time to get back on track. And there are also two very important things about sleep in terms of memory. The other one is that there's actually some replay system there. So, for example, imagine that I learn how to drive today and I have a driving lesson. Then for the next few days, during sleep, our brain actually replays what's happening. And so essentially, even while we are sleeping, we are still learning.
Processing.
Yeah, exactly. And the other crucial thing is that it's also very important for creativity, because it's actually during sleep where you connect those ideas that are seemingly totally unrelated. And that also explains why a lot of scientific discoveries and even other creative endeavors have happened just during a night's sleep, because of exactly that stage.
Yeah, because basically you also switch off the thinking brain, and your intuition and everything else has the opportunity of serving you because you're not interfering so much.
Exactly. And the other important point about sleep is that it really affects your emotions and like how impulsive you are and whatnot. Because one of the systems that happens when you don't sleep well is that the connection between the amygdala, which is sort of your
reptilian brain,
it's sort of your, it's almost like a fire alarm, let's say, brain, and then the connection between that and your prefrontal cortex, which is sort of the guy who is going there to just check if the threat is real or not, and turns off the switch. Basically, the connection between them is severed. And so essentially, there's no communication between them anymore. So, for example,
so you don't decide consciously what you really want to do in the face of a challenge.
So for example, for anything that happens to you, the alarm will ring. And then supposedly the guy was there to check if it was true. Even if he tries to switch off the alarm because of a false alarm, it just can't switch. It just can't switch it off because the communication is gone.
Then what happens is this tension goes up, right?
Yeah, exactly. You essentially have much more difficulty controlling your own emotions. And what this means is that, for example, when you feel that you are more impulsive, or if you feel that you are more lazy, then it may actually just be lack of sleep. And there's also another mechanism that's really important, which is that there's a sleep stage which is called the REM sleep, and during that stage is the stage where we dream, but that's also the stage where we sort of deal and face with our emotional troubles. So, for example, if you sleep less, then you don't really have the chance to have that benefit from sleep. And so you might wake up the next day more anxious and more depressed. And so, besides that, sleep really affects every part of your life. And so that's essentially why I actually choose it as my first priority above everything else, essentially.
Well, coming from an ex-gamer, that's really interesting. Why am I saying this? Because I don't know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I notice is that, when teenagers and like young teenagers, older teenagers that are into gaming a lot tend to get lost with time and sort of play a bit into the night.
Yeah.
And even during school time, and then what happens is that then you tend to go to bed later and with a very active mind, because you've just been focusing on something, trying to resolve situations which are coming up in the game, depending on which kind of game you're playing, but all games are more or less exciting, basically. And then of course you have few hours to sort of relax, go into alpha state, REM, and all of those things that are necessary to regenerate your cells, your system, to order your memory, all of that. And so then having school at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning, generally in Portugal, that means that most of our youngsters are not really sleeping enough. So was that the case with you?
Especially during secondary school, that was a lot of the case. Especially with my phone just snuggling into my sheets.
Exactly. So no one knows you're awake, but you are.
Exactly. That was essentially the point. And I think that was exactly the main motivation to actually quit games, was that, well, games are good, and if I could really control myself and just play for 30 minutes, that might actually have some great benefit. But if every time I play, I'm at the risk of just going totally overboard and spend like 6, 7, 8 straight hours playing, then it might be better just go down to zero rather than have to face that risk every single time. Because if you expose yourself to that risk so many times, then one time or another, when you are more vulnerable psychologically, you might just give in to the temptation. And so that was sort of my solution. A lot of the things is just, if you can't really control yourself, then it might be better just to go back down to zero.
That's a bit like any kind of addiction, in a sense. And so you did sort of consider yourself a bit addicted. So my question is, how was it for you to go cold turkey? That's what you call it, like zero. From this to zero is sort of, how were those days, those adaptation weeks?
Well, there is something very funny, which is during my gap year, I had sort of this double plan. So one of the things that I decided to do was to do game live streaming. And so there was a double reason for that. So when we are trying to decide about something and to have a plan, we should always make it so that if that things goes well, then something good happens. But if something goes bad, then something good also happens. And so that was my plan with the game live streaming. So if the channel actually went well, I could perhaps pursue it and, who knows, even do it as a career. But if I failed, what happens is that because I turned gaming into a job, This has a lot to do with mindset. So when you turn some sort of addiction into a job, into an obligation, then the theory is that you might actually start to have less of a craving for that, because you don't associate that with something relaxing that you enjoy, but actually some obligation. And we generally associate obligations with something that we don't like.
Right.
So I guess that's a theory how we could break up addiction. Is just, so for example, if you want to give up cigarettes, actually make a plan to smoke at this time, at that time, at that time, until you get so tired of it that you just that you just are in an easier position to actually leave them.
Okay.
And I guess the other theory that you could do is just sort of change the story that you tell yourself. Because in a sense, if we, for example, believe that we are the smoker who is trying to quit, then that's a very hard mindset, because what we associate with that is someone that's going to fail at some point. But if we are smokers, but then I guess it's also that same idea of behave like the person you want to become. So, for example, start telling yourself, I'm a non-smoker. I don't smoke. What would a non-smoker person do? Or, for example, if you are trying to lose weight, what would a healthy person, a slim person would do? And instead of trying to think of yourself. So, for example, that's also one of the things is with losing weight, people generally associate with if I don't eat that cake, if I don't drink that thing, then I'm missing something. But that shouldn't be the story that you tell yourself. The story that you tell yourself should be, this food is actually enslaving me. I'm a slave to this food, and I need to do the best for myself, which is just removing those shackles and just letting it go, because I'm more important. I need to take care of myself, because I mean, I'm the only person in this world that can truly take care of myself.
Right.
Because after all, we are the only ones that can actually change the narrative that we tell ourselves. So, for example, when you try to change someone else, I've tried that, and I found that it is always limited, because you can tell that person whatever you want, but if that person is still convinced otherwise and is just telling themselves a completely different story, that they can't do that, they are like this, and that they have certain limits, then you really can change those
the narrative.
Yeah, and since you can change the narrative, then you can truly change anyone else.
Right. So but you can change yourself if you change your own narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that was also one of the ideas behind doing the YouTube channel, was that I'm a bit annoyed of trying to change people one by one and them not really corresponding to my expectations. So what I'm going to do instead is just provide the content to everyone, and then whoever is actually interested in changing their own narratives and changing their lives for the better, then they can enjoy all this amazing content. Because what I really want is just to give you all the tools that you need to actually just become the greatest person that you can be. Because after all, like, I truly believe that the thing is that we usually wait for the government to do everything for ourselves and to be the agents of change. But if we think about it, the government actually has extremely little power over our lives. They're not really checking if we slept well yesterday, or if we are eating well, or if we are being successful at school or at work. I mean, at most what they can do is raise your wage by 50 euros or something, but that's really not going to change your life. But the one thing that's going to change is if you actually take responsibility for your own life and actually just strive to do it for the better. Because not only is it better for you, but it is better for everyone else. because one of the things that I found, like while being with every person that I come across, I feel that even though I don't even talk to many of the people around me, especially the ones that spend some time with me, I sometimes see certain changes. So, for example, during my time at Warwick, I usually hanged around a lot in the common kitchen, and so what I saw was that, for example, some people, like some students, especially the ones that were closer to me, they started eating healthier or making better lifestyle choices. And it wasn't really because I tried to convince them to do anything else. Sometimes people just need an example to follow. Like, I think people in general just need something to believe in and to see that it's actually possible.
That it works.
And back to what I was saying. So it is really when everyone starts taking responsibility for their own lives and doesn't wait for anyone else to act, but instead tries to ourselves take the initiative, then if every single individual does that, that's really how change happens. When each individual starts really taking care of themselves, then we can then join forces together and just make real change, instead of just waiting that a few people make the change, which
make the
will
choices and the
happen.
decisions, right? Make the choices and the decisions for us. That is really brilliant. And that ties into something we were talking about before we initiated this live broadcast. And actually, I can't remember what the subject was, but what we were referring that if you're always so worried about what everyone else is going to think about your attitudes, about what you look like, about what you do. It was about everyone needing to have a degree and sort of do the same things, and then not allowing each one's uniqueness to come through. And you were mentioning the fact that if you're always like scrolling on your mobile phone and always so worried about the world outside there, then you never really get in touch with yourself, and then you cannot really discover your uniqueness, because your uniqueness is not in the books you read, it's not on your mobile phone, it's not in the movies you watch. Those things can sort of trigger something in you, but then you need to take the time to spend with yourself and finding out what are the self-saboteurs, and also what are your strengths and what is actually unique about yourself. But if you're going to do everything the same as everyone else is doing and trying to sort of study from the same books, basically, like in a sort of figure of speech, your critical thinking, your uniqueness, your creative expression will not shine through. So if you'd like to expand just a little bit around that, because we are almost down to half an hour. That was the conversation we were having before we started the broadcast.
I mean, so I guess there are 2 points that I would like to cover there. So the first one is that what we need to realize is that everything we do actually shapes the way we think, feel, and act. And so what I found was that with everything that I did and everything that all of those things were changing my brain in a certain way to then allow me to see the world completely differently. And I think like every single thing really changes it. And so if we are all the time on our phones, we really need to be careful, because one thing that I like to say is that you really are you are what you practice. So essentially, if during your entire day you are just practicing at going on social media and being distracted and that whatnot, then you are just becoming very good at being on social media and getting distracted. And that might not be a very good long-term plan. And why is this? Because this is a sort of theory that I sort of came up with, is that if people all have the same behavior, then everyone is like sort of photocopies of each other. So there's no real distinction. So for example, when you are going to the job market, then when the employer sees each person's resume, they are essentially just a photocopy of each other. So there's really nothing to distinguish those people. And what is the problem of being a photocopy? The problem is that you have absolutely no power of choice. Because imagine that I'm the potential employee and you are the employer. And so I come to you and I say, I want a job. And what are you going to tell me? So you are going to lay out all the conditions that you have. And if I accept, that's fine. And if you don't accept, that's fine as well, because there are a million other people, a million other photocopies waiting there to accept the job, perhaps at a lower pay and whatnot. So what that means is that your choice is zero because there is a lot of competition. So the solution to that, what is it? Is that you sort of have to have some special thing that separates you from the rest, because that's really the only way that you can become truly free. Because when you are actually very good and you have a very unique set of skills, then it is not you, the employee, that needs the employer. It's the opposite. So if you are now the employee with that very unique set of skills, what happens is that you will go to different employers, and those different employers actually want to hire you. So who now has the negotiation power? It is not the employer anymore, but it is you. You are the person that actually has the control over whatever it is that you are going to do. So it is really important to try to distance yourself and have some special trait or some unique set of skills that separates you from the rest. Because otherwise you are just going to be a photocopy. And when you are a photocopy, you have no power of negotiation. It is all in the employer's hands. So this means that you'll very likely have low pay, and you'll very likely have not the nicest timetables and not the nicest perks. While on the opposite end, if you actually have the power of negotiation, then you can actually sort of build your own job, because if that employer doesn't want your conditions, then you can just look for everyone else. So in a sense, the idea here is that the person who least cares about is always the one who has the power of negotiation.
Yeah.
And what was the other idea that I want to introduce about that? Oh, right. It was also the thing about creativity. So the thing that I found, especially after going to England, is that you can just figure out a lot of things on your own. You don't have to just be limited to what is in the books, to what is at school, to what is in YouTube videos, even to what is in whatever it is. You can actually find the answers as well in yourself. And what I found is that the more I get better, the more I actually need to personalize the solutions to myself, because like the general solutions usually work at the beginning, but the better and better you get, the more specialized the solutions need to be. And for that, you need to understand yothink and that's the key, is that to understand yourself, you really need to give yourself the time to connect with yourself. And I think that was the biggest lesson that I took from staying at Warwick University, was because since I was naturally alone, then that actually made me realize that it is only when you are in solitude, and when you are in solitude, I don't really mean being the only person in the house, but just being the only person. But like what I mean by solitude is like not absorbing any sort of information from any other source around you. So for example, looking at your phone, you are receiving information, or looking at the TV, you are receiving information, or even having someone else talking to you, you are receiving information. What I found is that you can't really be truly creative unless you are absolutely alone with just your own thoughts. Because the funny thing is that creativity, I truly think that it's born out of solitude. So basically, the greatest ideas that I get are mostly just when I go outside and just walk around in circles, and the most amazing ideas happen. Or for example, when I'm cooking the meals, or when I'm washing dishes, or when I'm in the shower. In those moments of solitude, it's really when the greatest ideas happen. And the problem now is that because we have our phones constantly in our pockets, then that we are essentially the first generation who is really not forced to have even a second of solitude. Because if we think about it, like back in the day, even sort of 50 years ago, for example, if you had to wait in line for something, or if you were walking the dog or something, then those were forced moments of solitude where you sort of had to deal with your own issues. But now we are actually able to silence ourselves at every single second by just being on our phones.
Through noise.
And the problem with that is that not only are we less creative and have less critical thinking, but we end up being more depressed and anxious, and we sort of have an identity crisis, because we really never had the time to connect with ourselves and understand ourselves. And so that's also why I think that I also think that's why during this pandemic, especially during the quarantine time, some people really felt something was off, because it got to a point where we got so tired of looking at our phones and so tired of entertainment, then the only thing that we had left was looking at ourselves. Yeah. And I mean, looking at ourselves for the first time is a pretty scary experience. So, and the thing to realize is that I think that is really one of the starting points of everything, is really just allowing yourself to actually, because the idea is that the more you are connected to everything else around you, the less you are connected with yourself. But the problem is that at the end of the day, what will determine your happiness will be much more how faithful you are to your own identity, rather than to how everyone expects you to be, or to what is the usual pattern of success or of beauty or whatever value you are trying to achieve.
Yeah. Thank you, Ricardo. That is actually the most relevant thing, because nowadays, in our fast-paced world where everything is at the distance of a click, and where people are very distanced from their own feeling and from listening to their intuition and from then developing their creativity and so on, solitude has become a threat and has become scary, and it's become solitary instead of solitude. And in fact, in my own life, I cultivate solitude a lot. And people sometimes question, where do you find so much time to do these things, to create these things? It's not that, because when you cultivate solitude, time expands. And this would be a whole theme for, even within mathematics, would be a whole theme, because time is non-linear, the same as space, the continuum, time-space continuum are non-linear. And one of the ways we can really tangibly experience this is through solitude. And when you are in this space of solitude, time and space expand. But we're not going to go into that because we're already at 40 minutes, but who knows, another
that
time
will be
we
for
might get
another
back
time.
together. Yeah, because it's a whole theme in itself.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I'm
I mean,
sure
we could spend another half hour or even an
very
hour just
easily,
discussing that.
very easily. But because people are always complaining that they have no time, I would like to leave this sort of invitation. Like, if you really want to expand your time and to have more time to be creative and to realize what you really want in life and what is your true potential, who are you, what is your uniqueness, then give yourself that time for solitude, and that will spread out throughout all of your other activities, all of your reality. Everything you do will be imbued with a different kind of presence, of consciousness, of capacity, and uniqueness, obviously, which is where the whole conversation started here.
Yeah, for sure.
Ricardo, this has been amazing. I really love listening to you and your clarity and the simplicity with which you explain these things, which seem like rocket science to many people, is really brilliant.
Honestly, I think that's actually an effect of. This was one of the effects, and also one of the reasons why I chose to do mathematics. Was actually, I guess the main reason was really to get this higher level of reasoning, because this sort of abstract thinking, you can't really achieve it in any other subject. And so this really, the thing about mathematics is, first, it's really all about problem solving. And in a sense, I guess you could say that life is also all about problem solving. And also, the way mathematicians solve problems is exactly how I approach life. So essentially, the goal is, not only do you want to find the solution, but you want to find the simplest solution possible.
And also enjoy the process, right?
Yes, of course. So, for example, in my case, what I did throughout these 3 years was always just removing everything that is unnecessary, removing all the beliefs that are not actually
supporting.
Yeah, exactly, that are just shackling me. And I can actually release myself from those because I don't actually need them. So I will just do that. And it is really, once you simplify throughout and you keep simplifying, that you get to a point where only what is most important is
the
left.
Essential, the essence.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Because the thing is, for example, with my mobile phone, nowadays I rarely used it. I rarely use it when, for example, in the past, I actually used it a lot. And the thing is that your phone becomes much less interesting when there are actually no interesting apps on there to go. So even though nowadays I still have a smartphone, my relationship with it is completely different. It's not really the smartphone that is controlling me, that is shackling me. It is I that is seeing the phone as simply a tool.
Something
a tool
that you can
I
use.
want to use for my own benefit and my own purpose, but I will not allow that one thing to control me.
Right.
And I think that really sums up my whole path throughout here, up until here. It is really releasing yourself from the unnecessary suffering, the unnecessary beliefs, the unnecessary lies that you tell yourself just to give an excuse to yourself and to others to not improve, to not take responsibility. Let go, remove all of those shackles, and what you're left with is with happiness.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant, wonderful way to end this conversation. We could go on, and
for sure.
we would not have a lack of interesting and very profound things to look at and share about. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for accepting this double invitation.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Thank you. And I look forward to more of your videos on your YouTube channel. If anyone wants to go and look up, Ricardo Ferreira is the name of the YouTube channel.
Correct.
Is his exact name. And you'll find lots of stuff about maths, which is put in a very simple way, and also about these themes that we have been approaching and which are so very relevant, though you put them in such a simple way that I'm sure anyone can understand and eventually look at things in a different perspective and in a way that really leads to what people tend to think they want, which is happiness. Exactly. Okay, right. So see you another time. I wish you all the best.
Future.
Yes.
Thank you, you too.
And we'll keep in touch. And I thank the viewers. And next week, we do not have our throwback session, but the following week, we're on again with another lindaschool ex-student, which I'll tell you about later on in the other week. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.